What if the biggest financial mistake you could make at 55 does not look like a mistake at all? No panic, no warning signs, no sudden crash. In fact, it feels like the smartest, safest decision you could possibly make. And yet, over time, it quietly leads to massive losses. Losses that do not show up immediately. Losses that build slowly, year after year, until one day you realize something is wrong. By then, it is very difficult to fix. This is not about a rare scenario. This is something millions of people do at 55 without ever questioning it. And that is exactly why it is so dangerous. Because when a mistake feels right, you never think twice about it. So what is this number one mistake? It is this: shifting your entire focus from growth to safety. At 55, something changes in your mindset. You start thinking differently about money. Retirement feels closer, time feels shorter, and naturally you begin to worry about protecting what you have built. This makes sense. You have spent decades working, saving, investing. The idea of losing a portion of that wealth becomes uncomfortable. So you take action. You reduce exposure to growth assets. You move your money into safer options, lower risk, lower volatility, more stability. And for a while, it feels great. Your portfolio looks steady. There are no big swings, no emotional stress from market ups and downs. You feel in control. But here is the hidden truth. You have not eliminated risk. You have simply changed its form. And the new risk you have introduced is far more dangerous in the long run. Because when your money stops growing, it starts falling behind. Not immediately, not dramatically, but quietly, through inflation. Every year, the cost of living increases. Food, housing, healthcare, daily expenses. Everything becomes more expensive. And if your investments are not growing fast enough to keep up, your purchasing power declines. At first, it is invisible. Your account balance looks stable. Nothing feels wrong. But in reality, your future lifestyle is shrinking. Now think about this for a moment. At 55, you are not at the end of your financial journey. You could still have 30 years ahead of you. 30 years where your money needs to support you. 30 years where costs will continue to rise. And if your money is not growing, how will it last? This is the part most people underestimate. They think of retirement as a short phase, but it is not. It is a long, extended period of life, where your savings need to do all the work. And without growth, that becomes extremely difficult. Now let me ask you something honestly. Would you rather deal with short-term market fluctuations or long-term financial decline? Because avoiding one often leads to the other. And this is exactly where people make the mistake. They become so focused on avoiding temporary losses that they ignore permanent ones. Now here is where it gets even more serious. When your investments are too conservative, you are forced to withdraw more from your principal because your returns are not enough to support your lifestyle. So you start dipping into your savings. At first, it seems manageable. You take a little extra each year, nothing dramatic. But over time, this compounds in the wrong direction. Your balance decreases, your growth potential decreases, and the cycle accelerates. This is how people run out of money. Not because they spent irresponsibly, but because their money was not working hard enough. Now let us add another layer to this: healthcare. At 55, you might feel healthy, strong, capable, but healthcare costs do not stay the same. They increase significantly as you age. And these costs are not optional. They are necessary, and often unpredictable. A single major medical event can create a financial shock. And if your investments are not growing, your ability to absorb that shock is limited. This is where things start to break down. Because now you are not just dealing with inflation, you are dealing with unexpected expenses. And without growth, your margin for error disappears. Now here is something even more subtle. When people shift to safety too early, they often stop paying attention. They feel like they have already solved the problem. Their money is safe, so they disengage. They stop reviewing, stop adjusting, stop learning. But money does not manage itself, and the world does not stand still. Inflation changes, markets change, opportunities change, and if you are not adapting, you are falling behind. Now think about this. How often do people review their financial strategy after moving to safe investments? Rarely, because they believe there is nothing to fix. And that false sense of security is part of the problem. Now let us talk about something that makes this mistake even more costly: longevity. People are living longer than ever, and that changes everything. Because the longer you live, the longer your money needs to last, and the longer it needs to grow. But if you stopped growth at 55, you are not preparing for longevity. You are ignoring it, and that creates a gap between what you have and what you will need. Now here is where reality starts to hit. At 65, things still feel okay. At 70, you start noticing pressure. At 75, you begin to worry. And at that point, fixing the problem becomes extremely difficult. Because you cannot go back in time. You cannot undo years of low growth. You cannot easily rebuild. This is why this mistake is so dangerous. It does not hurt immediately. It hurts later, when your options are limited. Now let me ask you something. If you knew this today, would you still make the same decision at 55? Probably not. And that is the power of awareness. Now here is the important part. Avoiding this mistake does not mean taking reckless risks. It does not mean putting everything into aggressive investments. It means balance. It means understanding that you still need growth, but in a controlled, strategic way. A mix of stability and growth. Enough to protect your wealth, but also enough to sustain it. Because protection without growth is not protection at all. It is slow decline. Now let us bring this into a real perspective. Imagine two people at 55. Both have the same savings, same income history, same goals. One decides to move everything into low-return, safe investments. The other keeps a balanced approach, maintains some exposure to growth, stays engaged, reviews their strategy regularly. 10 years later, their financial positions look very different. The first person has stability, but limited growth. Their purchasing power has declined. Their withdrawals are increasing. The second person has volatility at times, but their money continues to grow. Their portfolio supports their lifestyle more effectively. And over time, that difference becomes massive. Not because one took extreme risks, but because one understood the importance of growth. Now here is something to think about. The goal is not to avoid all risk. The goal is to manage it intelligently. Because risk is not the enemy. Misunderstanding risk is. And at 55, this understanding becomes critical. Because every decision you make now affects decades of your future. Now imagine reaching 70 and realizing your money is not enough. Not because you did something reckless, but because you tried to be too safe. That is a painful realization, and it is completely avoidable. Now let me bring this all together. The number one retirement mistake at 55 is not a dramatic decision. It is a quiet shift in mindset, from growth to fear, from strategy to comfort, from awareness to assumption. And that shift creates long-term consequences. But here is the good news. You can avoid it by staying balanced, by staying informed, by understanding that your financial journey does not end at 55. It evolves, and your strategy must evolve with it. And here is one final thought that most people overlook. Time does not just pass, it compounds. Every year you stay too conservative, every year your money underperforms, every year inflation quietly eats away at your purchasing power. It all stacks up, not in a way that shocks you overnight, but in a way that slowly limits your choices. Fewer options, less flexibility, more dependence. And that is the real cost. Not just money lost, but freedom lost. Because in retirement, wealth is not just about numbers, it is about control over your life. And the earlier you protect that balance between growth and safety, the more powerful your future becomes. If this made you see things differently, do not ignore it, because awareness is only powerful when you act on it. Share this with someone who needs to hear this. And if you want to protect your wealth, avoid costly mistakes, and build a future that actually lasts, then subscribe to The Wealth After 50, like this video, and share it with others who are serious about their financial future. Because in the end, the biggest losses do not come from what you did wrong. They come from what you thought was right, but never questioned.